All right. Good evening. Buenas noches. Guten Abend. Welcome to everyone, amigos y amigas, friends, to another episode or another Tertuliando en Cuarentena, which is this intentional space that that I've decided to pursue, and so far has been really cool and therapeutic for me. And I want all of you to feel free to participate. You can ask questions, leave comments, and I'll try to bring them up. So tonight, we have a good friend of mine that I met probably 6, 7 years ago at this interesting progressive festival back in the U.S. And I'll bring him on over so he can share a little bit about him, and then we can begin this tertuliando in the typical fashion that we've had all of them today. So today shall not be the exception of a really good conversation. So welcome, Bushi.
Thank
Hello,
you, my
Bushi. How are you doing, my
friend.
friend?
I'm doing absolutely wonderful. Wonderful. So good to see you.
Good to have an excuse to get to see your wonderful face and get to have this tertulia with you. This is just a magnificent excuse.
Oh, wonderful. It's always good to have good excuses. And certainly this is one.
This is a legitimate one, and I know the
Yeah,
people. This is kind of like having an intimate conversation that people can peek in,
yeah.
participate, chime
Hmm.
in, and giving people that free space. So Bushi and I, we encountered each other. I don't know, maybe it was 12 or 13, but it was at this festival called the Wild Goose, and
I think it was 2012. I'm pretty sure.
there you
Yes.
go. And that was my first time there. So
Mhm.
Bushi was definitely a personality that got my attention a little bit, and we interacted. And I guess that sense of curiosity I felt was quite compensated in that dynamic that we had, and that bloomed to friendship. So
Yeah.
that's how we,
You
we, we met.
absolutely. It's been a wonderful number of years that I've known you and watched you grow and do what you do in such a wonderful fashion. And I always think back to the photo that you and I took at the Wild Goose, our first meeting. And that particular photo and the energy that you exhibited, even as a young man then, was tremendously agreeable with my own energy. And so I've held you close to my heart for a very, very long time, friend.
So Bushi, give us a little. This is kind of how I start. In the context of the now of these coronavirus times, how has this
Yeah,
been for you in terms of a contrasting transition? If you were to say pre-corona times and
yeah.
now during corona times, what have been
Yeah.
some quite observable differences and adjustments that you have to make? And I want you to give me an answer as to you personally, your
Yeah.
family, and also maybe
Mhm.
your observations socially that you've made in these times.
Very good. Very good. Thank you very much. I can say personally, this has not been much of a disaster for me personally, as with regards to my daily schedule and regiment and what have you. For the last almost 11 years now, I've lived largely in isolation. I spend about 18 hours a day in solitude to practice. And so I'm kind of accustomed personally over the last 10 years of being alone and embracing solitude, embracing myself. My family, however, is they are social beings. My wife has a job. She is a healthcare worker, and she works with people who are educationally challenged, and they have developmental disabilities. And so for her, it has been much more of a tedious journey. We do have two children that are at home, even though they're 18 and 21 years old. They are still our children. One of them is a college student, and she's here away from school now, and it has been somewhat difficult for her. I think simply because so much of growing up, especially in the college terrain, brings people close to new friends, new experiences, avenues by which they can open up to one another. And so many of those for her have been closed. The 18-year-old, however, he's a senior, and so he has graduated officially. And now he spends a great deal of time thinking about this virus and how he can in effect, help other people in some way. And so all of us spend a tremendous amount of time working on ways in which we can help all the people we can during this. But for me personally, it's a tremendously sad time for many people. The loneliness, the isolation, not being able to hug people and to touch them, to embrace them, and so it's rather difficult. Even for me, I'm such a loving person. You know, when people come here, I don't care how old they are, whatever their age is. They're all my children, and I love them. So it is a bit difficult not being able to do that. Nonetheless, there's tremendous hope that we can do better and we can be better and we can be back together again soon. So, yeah.
Yeah, definitely. As Cornel West says, he's a prisoner of hope, and
Yes,
no matter how challenging the times get, he clings to that
absolutely.
hope. Yeah, I tend to be a bit fatalistic sometimes, but I guess even in my discourse, as I say, I'm fatalistic. I think there is definitely a bit
Yeah.
of hope that I strand to
Right.
because I keep on living and I keep on having stuff to look forward to, as utopic as it might be. Um, I like to ask my friends and the colleagues that join me in these tertuliandos, a question about different points and different times in their life. At least three moments. Could be more, but three specific moments or um, times that could have been processes in your life that you can point
Yeah.
to, that you think were cathartic, were catalytic, and you kind of maybe visualizing them as forks in the road. Can you share
Hmm.
like at least three times in your life? It could be more
Sure.
of
Sure.
incidents or processes that
Yeah.
definitely shaped
So
you.
I will try to do this. Yeah. When I was one of the forks, or I would say the points of separation between mainstream as well as cultural ideology, was when I was roughly 6 years old. I think that when I was 6 years old, I recognized rather early there was something wrong, and that there was something wrong in the world. Um, and where I developed much of these ideas at such an early age was greatly looking into my own family. You see, my grandmother was a minister, a very profound minister in the South, and I was her grandson, and she raised me to be, or I guess you could say, an extra voice. You see, being a young man, I was able
Okay, let's see. Give me a second, Bushi, because I lost you here for a second. Give me 1 second. Um, Let me see. Your audio decided to leave us and leave us stranded. Let me see if I can do something here. Um, Give me. Okay, it says that mic is not connected. I'm gonna take you out of the. Just hit the link back again, and then let's see if that will solve the problem. Let's see. All right. So in the meantime, we're gonna uh, wait in suspense for our friend Bushi, so he can continue sharing that story about his childhood. And also, I appreciate you guys' patience ahead of time. And I want to say hi to some people. Hey, Joseph Hernandez, of course I remember you. Cada que me acuerdo de ti, brother, allá en Alemania, en los partidos de béisbol. Bueno conectar con un latino cuando estuve por allá. Saludos. Saludos, Marce. Espero que allá en Argentina esté todo bien. Vamos a ver. Let's see. Let's see if we can have, let's see if our technology will cooperate. A ver, ok, dale. Continúa,
All
continue,
right.
my friend.
Very good. So, as I was saying, when I was 6, I was raised in Southern Baptist Church, and my grandmother did a lot of explaining to me as a young boy about the church and about the Lord and how the church worked and how the church should work. And I never did understand why she was educating me in such a way. I thought church was just about going to sing and to give God honor, but it was more so of an educational process for me as a young child. And what she was doing was preparing me to be able to speak the voice of women, the voice of children, the voice of love and compassion, because she knew as a woman in the South, and particularly a Black woman in the South in the church, she would not be given the same credence as the men. And so I was, as I often say, my grandmother's contingency plan. And so I think that was the first disconnect for me, that there's something wrong, pushing forward towards greater enlightenment and religious freedom, great graces in the Lord, but yet and still there's this backroom educational process taking place about something I'm not seeing, you see. The second, I would say, fork in the road for me was when I reached maybe around 18 and 19 years of age. I had found myself in the military, and I became a United States Marine and was going through all of the training necessary and shipped off to war and competed with ships and tanks and airplanes and people against other nations and all of those sorts of things. And so I learned then that, speaking of the dividing point, that if this is what all of our thinking, if this in fact is what all of our uh, believing and all of our education and all of the great minds of our institutional establishment, even our government, if this is the great reward for having such great minds, then I knew then that this was not right. You see, and so that was another separating point for me, a great point in my life that I came to realize that there's something absurd about the way in which we are living as human beings on this planet. The third breaking point for me was, I would have to say, my dear friend, just a few days ago, when I witnessed the young man down in Georgia who tragically had his life taken from him from or by people who had been vigilantes for justice, so to speak, and they crucified that child. It was another point for me that I realized that my name means warrior, and it is time to educate people more and more in profound ways with tremendous wisdom and insight about their natures as human beings. And never has any other point in my life have I looked into just how important we are to each other as that incident. Here we are fighting a pandemic. Here we are, people are dying by record numbers, over 80,000 within a few days. And we still find it within ourselves to take a break, to diminish the true nature of human beings. How absurd, you see. It's kind of like running while you're on fire. Yet, because the flames are so hot, you decide to pop into some convenience store and get yourself a cool drink to drink. It is absurd. It's absurd to stand and speak so wonderfully of justice and honor and valor, and yet within our people, within the citizens of this country.
Okay, sorry. I think we lost you again. I think I think there's a might be a solution. If you have any notifications that are popping up, try to have those omitted, and I think it won't trigger the microphone. I'm gonna take you out. If you can take a minute or two and see if you can take those. It could be maybe notifications for messages or maybe calls. If you take those out, I think it shouldn't be a problem. So I'll
Oh,
take. Okay,
let me try that
I can
again.
hear you. I can hear you. Okay,
Okay.
okay, I hear.
All right.
Let's just let it
Mhm.
flow. So I wanted to ask you, when you decide, at your man, and one is so young. I mean, 18 years old is so young. When you decide at this age, more or less, that you decide to go to the Marines,
Mhm.
what
Yeah.
was the motivating factor? What was it that drove you to make that decision?
Yeah. So for me, it was a battered relationship that I had with my mother. Very few people get a chance to, actually hear about some of those things, but you are privileged because you are my dear friend.
Gracias.
You see, my mother and I did not have a tremendously good relationship. My grandmother and I did. And so when I reached a certain age, I knew that it would probably be best for me to continue my journey outward, as opposed to staying home and becoming like many of the young boys, young black boys down in South Florida, West Palm Beach, and Miami. Instead of getting into the drug trade and into the violence and things of that sort, I wanted to go and do something to help people. And the Marine Corps seemed like a really good idea. I went into the service, and my intention was to go in and be able to negotiate.
Okay, okay. Lost you again, and I don't want to miss any part of your story. I'm gonna do this. I'm gonna take you out. If there is any I don't know if that might work. I mean, I'll take you out, but if there's any notifications that might be coming in or might not be coming in, see if you can put those off. I'll take you out. I'll take maybe like a minute or two, and
All
then if you
right.
have any notifications that do pop up, um,
Nice.
let's see if you can.
And it could very well be this location that we're in. We are really, really way out here in
Oh, but
uh,
I don't think it's the internet, or I think it might be just be sometimes when there's I've had it with some of my guests when there's notifications that come in, it does tend
I see.
to play with it. So I'll take you off for a bit. If there's call notification or text notification that you can take
Uh,
off, I'll leave
yeah.
you 2 minutes to do that, and I'll bring you back. Okay.
All right. Thank you.
All right. So I guess this is going to be a little recess. um, just going to say hi to some of the people watching. Saludos, Luis. Luis, nos vemos pasado mañana. Luis Figueroa, que va a estar aquí con nosotros en Tertuliando en Cuarentena. Ana Rodríguez, saludos. Hi, Ana. I don't know if you speak Spanish, pero hola, Ana. Saludos. Y esperemos que ahora no haya más ningún tipo de, aunque eso es parte de la fluidez del vivir en el presente y bregar lo que venga, como podemos manejarlo. So as things go along, we manage them as best we can. So let's see if those suggestions in the technical realm that I gave Bushi would help to keep the flow of the conversation going. So just have a little patience, have a little bit of patience, un poquito de paciencia. Saludos, Janice. Un poquito de paciencia, a ver si puede seguir fluyendo. Le estaba preguntando a Bushi, I was asking Bushi, sobre su decisión de irse a los Marines cuando era joven. So about his decision of going to the Marines when he was a young guy. Um, I don't want to miss any of Bushi's story. Nah, well, you stick around, Hannah. I don't want to miss any part of it either. So, and I don't want to have any little technical things that might get in the way. If they can be avoided to interrupt the flow. So let's see if we can back him have him back again. If not, we're living the present, having this flow. So we'll flow with it. All right.
Oh, can you
So
hear me?
yeah, I can, and you giving me the opportunity of kind of like entertain people a little bit as you're dealing with the technical aspects outside, and I'm I'm doing a little bit of this, a little bit of that, giving a little bit of context.
Oh,
Oh,
wow. That's
I
good.
asked him this question, giving a little background. So I was asking you basically about your decision of going to the Marines, and then you were
Hmm.
giving us a little bit of a backdrop on that. Let's
Yes,
see. Here we
yes.
go. Here we go. We got you
All
again.
right. Thank you so much. So, yes, I left to go to the Marines because my mother and I didn't have a tremendously wonderful relationship. I grew up one of those children that looked tremendously like my father. And my mother and my father didn't have good blood between them. And so it made it somewhat difficult for me and made it difficult for her seeing me every day. So I went into the military to hopefully see the world and change my life and get away from the society in which I would eventually, now that I was an adult, go into. So I went into the military to learn and then also to hopefully help other people to become better people. Um, and my mother did not particularly want me to do that. It was something that she was saying that no, you can go on to school, and I told her, well, I'll go to school while I'm in the service, those sorts of things. But it was, that fragile and sometimes very volatile relationship with my mother that led me to military. And today, she and I both are tremendously glad that I made that choice because it was the beginning of me seeing the world from a very tacit perspective. You see, there are three types of ways in which we learn as human beings. The first way in which we learn is called explicit knowledge, and that's usually through textbooks. When we go to school, they tell us what to think, to know what the answers are. You see, when I was a little boy, Pluto was a planet, and now the explicit knowledge has changed, and it is not so. Then you have what is called codified knowledge. Codified knowledge, root word there is code. It is the street sign, it is the dotted line, perforated line in the middle of the road, it's the stop sign, all the social norms everybody understands, you see. But then there is a third type of knowledge many of us as human beings never reach. We never are even suggested surpass, and that is tacit knowledge. Tacit knowledge, you can't hand somebody a book and say, well, this is the way that it is the truth. It is learned firsthand, you see. It is giving someone the ingredients and walking them through the process of making a pizza. You see, get to touch it, they get to feel it. If it comes out rather asymmetrical to a round circle and looks more like I don't know, a stromboli, then at least the architect understands firsthand what they did and how it got to be in this way. So this is called tacit knowledge. And this is the one thing that going into the military enabled me to do. That is to firsthand touch some of the myths, some of the misconceptions, some of the doubts that I had been absurdly, taught. I often say that we are all post-traumatic victims of the post-traumatic stress disorder of our parents. Whatever their wisdoms are become our wisdoms, and unchecked, we will carry on. In other words, we will transmit the same absurdities down throughout the course of history. And so, being one of those children where I had an actual opportunity to see the world on my own without someone actually guiding me, such as a parent or a teacher, um, it enabled me to really, really embrace what was taking place around me and to have to adjust socially, psychologically, in many cases, even culturally, just to fully know what is taking place around me. Yes. And so the military was good for me. I continue to speak of military training and some of the things that I've learned over the years, even as I minister today.
Was the military experience as a gain for you a sort of you? I mean, which is kind of how we go into life and we take stuff, but was it in the sense of that you were able or you had to kind of take the good and leave the bad? And I guess more specifically, you mentioned you had to deconstruct some things and demythify. I don't know if that's the proper
Hmm.
word. What were those?
Hmm.
What were maybe one or two of those things that you can remember that were
Yeah,
breaking points in you demythifying some things?
right. Well, two things in particular, and those two things help to shape the work that I do now. The one is the myth that many people, as I was growing up in the South, there's this kind of ambivalence, you see, down in the South, especially in impoverished areas. I was born in West Palm Beach, Florida, but I was raised largely in a little city, port city called Riviera Beach, Florida. And Riviera Beach is known for violence and crime and murder, drugs. It is a port city, and so many, many large barges and vessels travel into the city, and it is a haven of crime and drugs and things of that sort. But it is also something else. It is the world's most opulent possibility of wholesomeness if it can be harnessed and transformed by the minds of the people who live there. So one of the first things that I learned when I went into the military was a lesson that was counter to what many black people in the South and where I grew up had admonished me with, and that is all white people are out to get you, that they are mean, that they don't care about you. They will allow you to do whatever you need to do, but you will always get the short end of the stick, you see. Once I went into the military, this changed that perspective or that viewpoint that I had been so absurdly sold. I had met some of the most wonderful people, and still am very close to some of the most wonderful, caring people who have served in the military. As a matter of fact, all of us had to endure the same traumas of war. You see, when I went in as a young person, I went almost immediately to war. I'd gone through the necessary challenges of boot camp and training CTSOI, advanced warfare school, and then I was shipped off to Operation Desert Shield, Desert Storm. And I was barely 19 years of age at this particular moment. And many of my comrades, all of my comrades, had the same vested interest, and that was to keep their fellow Marines alive. And this changed my perspective because they were no longer white. They were no longer seen as the Southern gentlemen who will speak kind words to you, but they will treat you the first opportunity they get. This changed my perspective, and this was the perspective that I was attempted or attempting to be sold by many of the people in which who were family members and friends and people in the general community. And the other is that Buddhism and many of the world's religions that in many cases we speak not about in our Christian churches are speaking at the very heart, the very core, the same principle of love that we speak. You see, it became difficult to look at a person as a Muslim person or an Arab person or a person who would do you harm when they treat you as if they're glad to see you. You see, we did a great deal of work to liberate people, but you know,
Okay, lost you for a little bit. I think if you hit mute on mute, I think that will help. Let's see. It helped last time, so I'm just trying to find a pattern of technical solution. All right.
did that help you
Sí,
there?
sí, amigo. Sí, so that seems to be a good trait. So
God.
you were saying that in meeting the other in that experience that it
Mhm.
was harder to, I guess, caricaturize the other. Or I don't want to put words in your mouth, but
Yeah, it became, you know, when you've been taught most of your life, like many of us have been taught certain things all of our lives, and when you never have any experience to counter that, then that particular perspective, that psychological reality, will exist and it will shape your future. But there is an existential reality. And in order to discover that existential reality, you must be vulnerable and open to, you know, other people's ways, other people's cultures, being open to other people's ideas. And what I came to discover was that while I had been
okay. We similar problem. I'm so sorry to. I'm the bearer of bad news. All right, you give that a shot again, and I think that, I mean, we'll work with that because I lost you, and I'm learning and unlearning here. So maybe if you, yep, happens again, I'll let you know again, and let's see.
yes,
Dale, dale,
other
dale.
religions, other people um, were at the very core of their.
Okay, I'm losing you again. My theory right now is that I lost you. I don't know why it might be. I know the times that I've taken you out of the room, bring you back. There's a more lengthy amount of time that your voice doesn't cut us out. If you want to try that again, let's see. If it doesn't substantially give us a good run, I'm gonna try the other thing before.
All
All right.
right.
Sorry about that.
Okay. All right. No problem. And, you know, one of the things that we learn is
Okay, same issue. I'm gonna take you out. Take you out. I'm gonna take you out, and I'll bring you back in. All right. Well, you'll come back in because I think that might be the issue. Um, we'll run with the punches. All right. People, we just seem to be having a pretty technical hindrance today, and um, and it's good. Well, it's not good, but it's a good learning experience. So just roll with it. So let's just wait for Bushi to come back. Okay, let's have him back. All right. Hi, Bushi. So, yeah, let's see. We got you again.
all right. All right. Well, very good. So yes, I had an opportunity to see firsthand that people are not quite like other people advertise them to be. In many cases, people are just like you and I. They have wants, they have desires and needs, and there's a code by which they live. Many of these codes are religious in nature. They form the moral and ethical foundation for which we will build our world and do build our world. But I came to learn through my military experience that we're more alike as human beings, even religiously, than we are different, you see. Yes. Mhm.
When you decide to become a or pursue seminary or theological preparation to become a minister, what you have this upbringing as a kid in a Baptist setting from what I gather.
Mm.
What propels you to decide to go to seminary or decide to go to these theological institute to later be a minister? What propels you to do that?
Yeah. I think
Okay, give me a second, Bushi, because we yeah, same issue here. If you happen to have any a microphone lying around or anything like that, we can give it a shot. See if that
I'm
might.
going to see. I have can find something, and it may be on the other side. I'm actually in my office, and I don't have it with me here. But one of the things is that I grew up in the church, and I had already established um, by the age of 17, I had already learned a great deal about the church, knew a great deal about the scriptures. My grandmother was prolific when it came to making sure that I was educated. My education started long before seminary, but as I grew up and had that first experience in Desert Shield, Desert Storm, and seeing people who had been destroyed by fey bombs, they had been destroyed by tank and artillery fire, they had been destroyed by small arms fire, guided munitions. Seeing those corpses laying on the road and in those cars led me, as I had felt necessary now, to increase my moral aptitude so that I might help people on the other end before all of this to begin loving each other. And so it was early on in my life that I realized after my war experience that if we change the product of human beings, we will eventually change the market of war. And so, with that being said, I have striven, and what pushed me towards theological.
Okay, give me it. Lost you. If I only knew how to read lips, then that would be amazing. All right, let's see. Try again. We're still on mute. Okay.
All right,
Okay.
I I wanted to make sure that I knew the best way and had at least a substantial education to know how to do that from a tacit perspective, how to help people and minister to them from a very tacit perspective. Prior to combat, I learned one thing of my own personal experiences of what it's like to realize early on that there's something wrong in your life, and then reaching another point in my life where I realized that I don't belong here, and then reaching another point in my life, which was I've got to get out of here. All of these three phases pushed me to go into my own psychology, to examine my human nature and what that nature means to God. And I sought very heavily, educationally, to learn the ways in which to communicate to people about whom they are as human beings. Mhm.
So this motivated you to go into ministry.
I would venture to say that my experiences of having been sent off to war actually shaped who I am today. It is the sole thing. We all have motivations to be something, but sometimes what we don't all have is the absolute fuel to fire up our motivations. You know, motivation without foot on the pedal is not going to go very far at all. So seeing combat actually compelled me to know more about how we can save our skin and not put holes in it. You see, not burn it, not to destroy it. Yes.
Yeah, that seems like such an obvious lesson,
Mm.
but maybe it's not that obvious to
I,
us or to humanity.
yeah. One of the things is I think sometimes, especially here in the country for civilians, the pressures of living a civilian life plus or in comparison to the life of living as a soldier, putting your neck on the line. There are sometimes some privileges, some graces given to civilians that they don't understand, that comes at a very high cost of other people. And I think it is important to educate even civilians the importance of playing a vital role in someone else's life in a productive way, and to not
Okay, I lost you there. I might take a different route this time. If I'll take you out if it's okay with you. If you do have a pair of a mic or anything, we can take a little break. It could be however as long as you might need it, and give that a try. See, we can extend this and go interruption free. So I'll take you out and then come back whenever you're ready. All right. All right, so this gives me a chance to work on my stand-up comedy. Um, not at all. All right, so hey, if any one of you guys watching have any, you guys or girls, ladies and gents, if you guys have any questions, feel free to ask. You can also drop lines to say hi and give greetings to Bushi or to me or to anyone else. But if you have any questions, you can write them down and I'll bring them on forth. If you want to know a little bit more about whatever that might be pertinent to this conversation and this dialogue. You can even ask it in Spanish, and I'll bring it on in English if you feel more comfortable doing it that way. So let's just wait here for a bit until Bushi comes back. Hopefully, we'll get this problem that has been inflicting this conversation taken care of. I really hope that you guys are watching. I guess, since you guys are the ones watching and listening to this, I hope you guys have been having a meaningful week, a meaningful day, and thought driven, creative, and inventive. Uh, Sometimes in these spaces of solitude and spaces of intentional quarantine, we can have some ideas that come in that might not come into us, and ideas that might not come in typical scenarios. So if there's some creative things that you might be thinking about doing, about writing, about listening more, whatever it might be. Um, might be kind of like a New Year's resolution, although in this case it might be more applicable than a New Year's resolution. So any kind of thing that you guys might be going through in these times, maybe writing it down, uh, sharing it with others. Maybe it's an idea you have of doing something you haven't done before. But being inward sometimes is, you know, it's a good space to give oneself to be more inward and really definitely looking forward to hear more of Bushi's story, which is something that really causes me a lot of interest in the people I've had over and seeing how the evolution of life has taken place in their shoes. Because I think live evolution and the evolution of life is quite central to being human. Sometimes we might seek refuge in staticism and being static. And I think when we kind of reflect the palm tree that, I as a Puerto Rican, we've seen hurricanes and how the palm tree sways from side to side to keep itself standing. I think it's a really important role and important mode to assume that we can be flexible in things, to not be so rigid that we'll break with the very first wind that we might get. So keeping in touch with people, keeping in touch firstly and foremost with ourselves is important. So I very quickly gave stand-up comedy a try. It didn't work. um, if anyone watching has any questions, feel free to drop. I already said that before, but any questions about anything at this point is good, and we'll see if it's relevant enough to bring forth. But if you ask a question, I'll bring it forth, especially if it's for Bushi, or just a question about maybe you've been watching the Tertuliandos, han visto los Tertuliando, you have questions about the dynamic of Tertuliando. I think this is the longest time I've ever had Tertuliando. This is probably the longest time I've ever had Tertuliando by myself. um, so we got Bushi here. Let's see, Bushi, if you can turn the camera. There we go. There we go. Okay, so let's see. Everyone, let's cross our fingers. All right. Enough of me. All right,
Can you
Bushi.
hear
Let's
me
see, buddy.
now?
I can hear you. Let's see if it'll last.
All right. Can you hear me?
Yes. So we were talking about. Let me recapitulate. Recapitular. About you're deciding to become a Baptist minister, and to give you a bit of a spoiler, I want to know after that what then got you to become a Buddhist monk. I mean, that is
Mhm.
probably one of the most present questions that you might get, and if not, it'll be today.
Yes, it is. It is. It is often the big question that everybody usually wants to ask. I think to answer that question, I had been as a child. I had explored through many readings and books and other means, learned about various other religions. I was a profound reader as a child, a profound learner. My grandmother made it necessary for me to read as much as I possibly could. Again, I often cite that I was her contingency plan. She wanted to make sure that I would be able to stand up with the big boys, I guess, whenever I got old enough to talk this theological talk, to talk this biblical talk. Um, and one of the religions early on that I had some encounter with was Buddhism. One of my dear childhood friends was a Vietnamese family, and often they would pray and they would go to their temple. And in my house, as well as many other houses or homes in South Florida, um, those people were different. You see, they don't worship the same way we do, and we were advised. Now, you don't know anything about them over there. You don't bother them, and if anything, just wish them well and wish them to be saved. You see. They worship idol gods, all that kind of stuff we were taught. But as I explored the world, I had done a tremendous amount of traveling. as a young person. I had encountered other cultures and countries, and Buddhism, when I was in Japan, largely influenced me because of its peace. The element of peace that is associated with Buddhism was profound to me. And as you can imagine, as a young man, I wanted peace after having experienced war in the Middle East and still dealing with the post traumatic stress disorder of a life with my mother. Um, so Buddhism really stood out. And the more I studied, you see, in Christian theology, read the life of Christ, the Old Testament, all of the various scriptures, and studying Buddhism at the same time, it on me. Where have I heard these stories before? Where have I seen some of these scriptures before? Where had I come in contact with some of these same suggested teachings before? And as time went on, I came to realize, wow, Jesus is saying the very same thing that the Buddha suggested, which led me profoundly to another area of Christian theology or biblical exposition that we normally don't hear about. As I'm learning now, there are few who have adorned these doors of paralleling Buddhism and Christianity, and I just so happen to be one of those people. But one of the things that I came to realize is that the moral and the ethical conduct by which Jesus is advising those who are following him is not the morality and is not the ethical guideline that was laid out pretty much by the religious rulers of his time. They were much more judicial in their handling of society. Jesus insisted on compassion. They were more concerned about being right and the letter of right. And Jesus dismissed the letter of right and forgave, you see. These are the very things that Siddhartha Gautama, 500 years before Christianity, had been teaching to Buddhists across all of Asia, India, and Tibet, and many other countries. And so I continue to do this work, and as I've uncovered more and more, there is a direct lineage between the Christ of the Bible and the Christ of India. You see, we often wonder, where did Jesus go when he left his mother and father? What did he do? What would have been the explanation, and what would have been, some sort of field trip that a young boy could take and be okay? Well, during his age and during his time, a great deal of learning was done in Mesopotamia. It's done in areas around India and the mountainous regions of northeastern China, and various other places. And so Jesus, if he were going to learn, would certainly, as it was the protocol then, to go to the areas in which all of the learned people would do and would go. It is interesting, is it not, that Jesus was capable as a young boy of standing up and speaking such profound things in the temple with grown men. And if he were to continue on in this ministry, he would certainly have to, I guess, make refined or galvanize his human intellect, his human capability of knowing the people in which he was going to be ministering to. And I think this is exactly what Jesus did. And so I was compelled to investigate these things. And being that Buddhism was helping me with meditation, dealing with stress, and coping with anxiety and all sorts of other things, I look deeper and look further and continue to do the research. And I think there's a tremendously obvious link between Jesus of Nazareth and Isa of China and Mashika of Tibet. These are the names given to the Christ who actually spent time with the monks and the Brahmins and the Siddhas and all of the great leaders during that time who would have been camped around various institutions and locations of learning about philosophy, history, esoteric things. You see, I think Jesus did all of this, and then came back to his came back to his native tribe, his native group, and of course he was different. They did not accept him so easily. You see, so but all of these things, this learning, my grandmother really pushed. She said, "Learn. Once you've learned something, learn some more. Once
Mm.
you've read it again. Once you've checked it, check again, then recheck." You see,
So definitely,
and
your
I
grandma
think.
definitely had a nonconformist, a
Oh, she
nonconformist
was
instilling in you.
yeah, she was a tiger for sure. I think she was very aware that the salvation of the planet, the salvation of mankind is only to be found when we find our true selves. And she really pushed for me to learn and know my true self so that I can help other people to become their truest selves as well.
You
What
bring
we have
this,
in life is Mhm.
you bring this notion of the true self, and I want to ask, as you are a Christian ordained Baptist minister,
Mhm.
why do you think it was important for you to make this decision? I mean, you could have continued being a Baptist minister and embrace this and embrace a more intentional Buddhist approach through your Christian ministry. Why did you feel it was necessary for you to make this very tangible, decisive move? And can you walk us a little bit through that? I mean, how was that?
Yeah,
Who did you engage with in conversation? Did you have a spouse yet at that point? Who did you
yeah,
talk to about these?
yeah,
Because it's the big thing to, especially
yeah,
from a level of perception.
yeah,
Holy shit, we've lost
absolutely.
Bushi. We've lost them to paganism or whatever. We might.
And that, my friend, is pretty much how it was. People felt like they were losing me, and many people, they said, "Well, now, he's reprobate, and he's turned away from God." What they did not understand was something that I had come to understand by the Spirit and by actually engaging in the activity of conversation and love, and that is that God is deeper in our society than we give God credit for. Enlightenment is before us each and every moment. But the only thing that keeps us from seeing this are, many cases, our psychological realities. And that is merely all they are. These psychological realities. Psychological realities such as these people are bad simply because my parents told me they were bad. These people are not right. This is not right. This is good. This is ethical. This is not ethical. And what we get and what we've been doing is passing down these absurdities. And so people never get a chance to really try it out for themselves. And so all they do is they translate and transfer inadequate responses to faith, inadequate responses to what they truly believe. And so for me, I was always, adventurous in a sense, I guess, of reading so much. I wanted to know. And whenever there was a possibility to touch it, I wanted to touch it because I wanted to galvanize what I think I know in my head, you see. And that was the thing for me. The more and more I explored Buddhism, the Buddhist teachings, More and more I engage the monks, and more I engage the lay people and the various teachings and practices. What I came to discover is the more and more I'm nectaring Jesus, because these are the same sentiments, these are the same urgings that Jesus urged his disciples, yet they didn't understand them, you see. For me, I did not want to live my life like anybody else. I wanted to, as an introvert, I wanted to explore this life as deeply as I possibly could. And in order to do that, it was going to take a certain amount of bravery, a certain amount of conviction, so to speak. And I thought to myself, what's the worst that can happen? Will they kill you? Will they talk about you? Will they rub your name in the mud? Will they ostracize you? Will they mistreat you? Will they, act as if you're not important? Will they share negative things about you? And I said to myself, yes, but hell, they've been doing this all the time anyway. So that was the motivation. It hadn't killed me in this many years, and so push it further, and go on out there and really for yourself. But it was, I really think that Christ urged me, God summoned me to go and to sit with the Buddha, so that we might understand as Christians. We understand the letter of the law. We understand structure and institution. We have created one of the finest operating systems to shelter as well as sheep people in all of human history. But what we have failed to do is liberate people psychologically. We have failed to liberate people humanly, you see. And so I believe that I was called to do this work. I still love Jesus just the same, but I also understand Jesus a great deal more now. You see, what we fail to realize is, if God is going to be a great God, and if God is bigger than us, then the things that we do are substandard to the things that God would do. When there is fear, God would say, rise up in courage. When there is hate, God would summon us to rise up in love, you see. And so those were the things that were missing within the Christian moral and ethical perspective of being a Christian. We talk a good game, but when it comes to putting our hands to the Damascus people, the people who fall in psychological torture, they fall in social nightmares, in economical nightmares. If we are not willing to touch them, then we are not willing, really going beyond human nature. We're not rising to God nature, you see. And so, my experiences in the military pushed me to do that. Seeing dead people will do something to you. It will do something to you. And to know that all of the great minds that came together to send us here, this is what they sent us to do. It forever changed my mind that killing people is not what God wants. You see, maybe in the Old Testament, but his son certainly had a different thing to say about that. Uh,
Do
so,
you do you remember any instances? I like I like hearing stories. I like hearing specific stories of I think they have incalculable value
yeah,
of
yeah,
incalculable pedagogical value, things that you can
yeah,
learn. And I'm wondering, when you are a pastor and you're preaching and speaking to people, were you at some point incorporating these elements that you were learning in Buddhism, and when did it have a tipping point that you were like, okay, I think I'm done. I'm finished with this particular journey.
Mhm.
Did you communicate these things to your fellow congregation? And I'm
I did.
wondering what was the feedback, if both good and bad,
Yeah.
or
Hmm. Yeah. So it was very difficult for everybody. I had been for a number of years incorporating the Buddha Dharma into the scriptures, drawing on the parallels. I have thousands upon thousands of parallel scriptures that are almost word for word spoken by both Jesus and the Buddha, as well as other great religious icons such as Shiva, Krishna. I incorporated all of these things, Buddhism being the largest component of my um, inclusion into Christian theology or Christian philosophy, simply because it dealt with the mind, the very thing that the church had seemed to have lost, you see. Um, I thought it was necessary that we understand how to reach forgiveness and also understand the dynamics of forgiveness. You see, dynamics play a great part in our bodies when we don't forgive. They can cause all kinds of sickness and illness. And by my fifth or sixth year in pastoral ministry, I had buried maybe, oh, I think maybe 8 or 9 people who had been tremendously faithful, yet they were very unhealthy. They had very unhealthy social practices. And they did things, not in moderation. And it caused a tremendous amount of harm to the body of Christ. And so I thought it was necessary to include these teachings about the mind. And one of the first things that happened was people began to inquire, because when you start speaking about the psychology of an individual within a traditional or evangelical or fundamentalist church, you're talking about something completely different
Mhm.
from the gospel they understand. You see, in many cases, in many fundamentalist churches, a psychologist is of no good because there's this heavy reliance on the power of God.
Mhm.
Yet God made human beings, He made us out of flesh and bone and all sorts of other things. And she crafted us in her image, and there are certain components of our humanity, all of the components of our humanity, we should be well endowed with a Bible knowledge about, because we are the carriers, the transmitters of the faith, you see. And so, yes, it was quite difficult. I lost a lot of friends, um, and many people who had supported me had stopped supporting, not because they didn't necessarily believe or didn't understand. Some did that, but many of them stopped following simply because the pressure from other people um, to step away, because you know how we do. Oh, you need to leave that alone. God is not going to like that. And then they'd pose these other psychological questions to people, and so sometimes people were a little bit reluctant to want to follow. In the 11 years that I've done this work, um, many of those that abandoned, many of those that jumped ship have come back. Many of those who would have never thought to think of Jesus because of a bad experience they had in church, they have come along full force. And so each and every day, I am, I guess you could say, in contact in some way with thousands of people who are now investing a great deal of inquiry into their faith that at a certain point did not bring them the liberation that they had hoped for. And what they are discovering is that the absence of their humanity in their faith has caused them great harm. And seeing how Buddhism, seeing how mindfulness, seeing how yoga, and all of the other ascetic practices, the plethora of ascetic practices that are available to us as human beings, can enhance their faith, the numbers are growing exponentially. And, so I would venture to say that a little bit of courage on my behalf, a lot of lost friends have reaped a tremendous benefit of what we now know as Bodhi Cristo. And people are coming to realize, at least in this small sense, that all of us as religious people, all of us as believing people have something in common, and that we should learn from each other because this enhances our individual religious experience.
And I want to talk a little bit about that, which is basically
Sure.
the 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 project, if we can call it that, or this new pilgrimage and this new path that you've been saying. You told me you've been going on maybe for over a decade. But
Yeah.
before I get to that, something I really value of this space is that I try to make the space quite free and quite open. I encourage people to ask any questions they might have, any doubts, any comments they might have. I try to make that
Sure.
a free platform, and there's this great value I find in a coming out story,
Hmm.
and that can look that can have many different colors. We hear coming out when we think about, a person of LGBT community coming out, and that is a great reference point, because it can draw a picture of that sense of bravery, that exposing oneself and vulnerabilizing oneself to maybe a family or an environment that you're inhabiting in that is probably hostile, and they're not
Yeah.
going to embrace that coming out. In your case, do you have any memories of this story of coming out that
Yeah.
was that you can point to, that was hard for you, and you can tell us about how you dealt with that dynamic?
Yeah. I'm glad you asked. That's a wonderful question. My wife and I often talk about this. So I had been a practicing Buddhist, unaffiliated in any way, just as a layperson, just a practicing Buddhist meditation, claiming Buddhism as um, a part of my theological as well as religious fabric, unbeknownst to my wife, for maybe 5 years. And she had noticed that there was and I'm in my library now, and I don't know if you can see, but there's a plethora of books, and there are many, many more volumes in storage. I have potentially, I think, around 2,000 volumes, and many of them are in storage. My wife had noticed that the credit thing, was for Books a Million, Barnes and Noble, whatever the bookstore was, but many of the books were on Buddhism. And she had inquired for a number of years, and I never did say it. I was all just research. And after about 5 years of this meditative practice and the various things that I had been doing, and also consulting with other people who were Buddhists and engaged in practice already, um, I sat her down and I had to talk to her. I said, I need to talk to you. And this is when, it was really burning on me that I need to make this transition. I had been so frustrated with the church, and, it's just as if we want to do business as usual. Everybody's, especially the preachers, are more concerned about the money that they receive than they are about the people in which they can help. And I never wanted to be a part of that. So, um, I sat my wife down and I told her I'm seriously thinking about taking Buddhist vows. And of course, she was totally taken by a loop. She didn't understand this. And so it was several months that we had to talk and we had to educate her about what Buddhism was. And my wife is a very intelligent person. She's the type she'd say, mm-hmm, okay, all right, yeah, I understand. And then she would take my books and she would go and read them. And months went by. You're talking about 8 or 9 months, 8 or 9 months, and we would have these conversations. And I would say something relative to Buddhism, and she was like, "Well, Christ said the same thing." And so that went on for a period of time. And then I told her, I said, I want to take this a step further. I would love to take ordination so that I can have an experience of living quite like Siddhartha Gautama, the Buddha himself. He had teachers, and then he left those teachers to go and find enlightenment himself. And how would you feel about this? And she had but one question, Angel. She said, "Now I've been reading your books, and I know monks, and monks don't have wives, and they don't have sex, and all." She says, "So what is all this going to mean for me?"
It's a great question, man.
Uh, my response at that particular moment, because she was looking me right in my eyeballs, I said, "Well, it means nothing. I don't think I'm going to do it." But about 2 weeks later, she said, "If this is what you want, I know you. I love you. And I know, based on what you've done in ministry thus far, whatever you do is going to enhance your work." And so it was there that I found great comfort in knowing that, oh boy, this is, it's already hard enough having to try to explain to people that you once pastored and all of the associations that you were a part of, what's taking place with you. So it was very refreshing that she was for me in my coming out. She was for me. She did exactly what we now encourage other people to do, and that is to be silent when other people are explaining their lot in life and hear them, because everybody has some sort of struggle and everybody has something that they like to do, and everybody has somebody or somebodies that they reflect upon and train from doing those things because of other people's notions and ideas. In many cases, we hold ourselves back from living simply because of the absurd ideas of other people. And so she allowed me to do that. She's a wonderful lady. And ever since that time, I knew that she loved me. If you ever want to know if a woman or a man or your partner loves you, do something as absurd as leaving one of the most foundational places in your life and see what happens. And so she's stuck with me, and she's been my support all of this time, and we've grown together. And so, it's I should tell you, Angel, that's the first time I've ever had to tell people of that particular struggle. No one's ever asked me that. They've asked me many things before how hard it was, but my coming out moment was to my wife. I had been her pastor for a number of years and the church leader. She was the first lady and well regarded as a Christian minister. Many people knew of my grandmother's work and the church that she helped to found and my work as a minister. And then to like Ben Chavis, just up and leave one day. I did that, and she was all for me. Yeah.
I think it's a valuable um, it's a valuable question because I, for one, have had a number of coming out moments. Maybe not in the sexual way. I'm a heterosexual, but in the ways of the belief the belief system paradigm. With
Mm.
first and foremost with my parents. That doesn't happen from night to day, but
Right.
to the point of being a fervent Christian to now being a non-Christian.
Right.
Um, but at the very heart and the essence of it, with the journey and as that has progressed, in the context of my family, once the sit down conversations happen, they realize that I'm still their kid. They realize
Yeah.
that not much has changed in the sense that that I do have a heart to seek truth, and I do have a heart to seek compassion and empathy, which is basically the core values they taught me, that
Absolutely.
transcend
Absolutely.
whatever affiliation one might have. I want us
That,
as we give landing to this conversation for, let's say, the last 10 minutes. I use have to as a guiding point. Tell us about this, the Cristo, the Body Cristo project you have, and I think that might answer a question I had. And you correct me if I'm wrong.
yeah.
I think of what the church, the Christian church in general, might benefit from if they were to intentionally incorporate this, this pilgrimage through the life of
Hmm.
the Buddha,
Yeah.
what the church might look like if they were to aggregate to welcome these things, these viewpoints. And
Yeah.
I think, I don't know if you might have the opportunity to answer that as you explained what you're doing. Maybe there's some
Yeah.
correlation there.
Yeah. So, Bodhi Cristo is, even the name itself is a partnership. It is an example that we as human beings, religious or non, can come together. I have taken two religious traditions and not looked at them as many people look at them as different. Many people will say, "Well, I am Buddhist, and these are the things that I do to find ethics and morality." Many people will say, "I am Christian, and this is what I do." And this often stagnates our communion in society. You see, as I've traveled all over this beautiful globe, um, as I travel, there are many places that I go that people can tell you a great deal about Christianity from other religions. They can tell you a great deal about its history, its tenets, its scriptures, all of these things. They can tell you this in many cases verbatim. But now I were to walk into any Christian church in the South, and I were to speak certain things about other religions, many of the people there would have no idea about what I'm talking about. And so, what this creates is a very one sided relationship in humanity. Yes, not necessarily in religion, but in humanity. And so, Bodhi Cristo is the awakening of our human potential through our minds, through our bodies. And it is the potential that is then translated and transferred into society as an altruistic and compassionate and wise effort. What we do now as Christians is we often spray and pray, but there's no tacit ability that we have, and there's also not much underlying psychological wisdom that we have. You see, and so Bodhi Cristo is actually what it means, or what it's the term itself means, the awakened Christ. And Bodhi Cristo is the effort of coming to a place of awakening and enlightenment within your own human self, and then being as compassionate, being loving, just like Christ was. You see, that is it's as simple as it can be of what Bodhi is. Bodhi is the Sanskrit word for awakening or enlightenment. and Christo, taken from its theological perspective, Christology, the study of the life of Christ. But we look at the Christology from a perspective of his human habits. What were his particular habits? Not his miracles, not the things that he said in per se, but what did he do physically? The joints moved, the fingers moved. There was some dirt collected here and there under his feet. You see, what did he do? And so, through an enlightened perspective, we set out to do the great compassionate love, the great compassionate work of love that Christ demonstrated in scriptures.
In a concrete way, what do you think, with your observations of your experiences as being a pastor and being a minister, quite specifically in the South where you were raised,
Hmm.
what would your imaginarium be like for a church, for a Christian church,
Yeah.
to start applying these, or borrow, let's say borrow these elements
Yeah.
from the East
Yeah.
and bring them forward? What do you think? What things do you think would start to look different, and how would they be different?
Well, the first thing I would do, Angel, is I think if we are ever going to fully understand what Bodhi Krishna, what the enlightened Christ, what Christ depicted in the scriptures did, the first thing we have to do is get out of these buildings that we're in. You see, we must first be willing to have the courage to step away from the various absurd means through which we've been propagating Jesus and get back into nature where Jesus spent a great deal of time. It's amazing. We have plastered walls and chandeliers, and Jesus had sandy feet and no place to lay his head. So until we're able to get to that place, we can't even begin to to really imagine any bigger. But that's big enough. Can we imagine ourselves free from the shackles of institutionalism? Can we release ourselves to be free to the God of nature, the Christ of the universe? You see, if we can do this, then I think the possibilities for what the church can be and the body of Christ can be is unbelievable. It is so good for us to have these kinds of freedoms, to step away from institution. I didn't gain a thing when I became a monk. I lost everything. But the most important things I lost was anger and
Hmm.
frustration and sadness. I lost all of those things. You've been in my company a number of time. We've had embraced each other a number of times over the years, and I continue to grow and harvest this compassion based on this principle of seeking enlightenment, always being empty, and loving people quite like Christ did. You see. I think that's where we're missing the point. I think that's where our myth and the mystery of what will be can be unfolded when we bring together, um, you know, true dismissal of what we've done. Let it go. It's all right. It's not going to kill you. Coronavirus has us locked away right now. We aren't dying from religious loneliness. But to release any other notion and be free and love people in the same way, that's the only way we get there. That's the only way.
I think, and to wrap things up with this last question, I kind of want to go, perfect circle back to where we started.
Hmm.
Um, but before I said that, I want to make some comments. Um, at least in the last, and then some people that know me know this sort of like recent, I guess, the last half a year. I've kind of gone through this journey of letting go, in a very tangible letting go, as I've let go of a relationship of 6 years, and what lied on the other side of that, that I had no I had no idea, no expectations because I was too worried or too busy suffering
Mm.
and
Right.
crying my heart
Right.
out. But with therapy and with CBT and with mindfulness and all these things that
Mhm.
I had heard of on a theoretical basis, but when I gave myself the opportunity of really investing myself into the possibility
Yeah.
of let's investigate the origin of these thoughts I'm having. Let's go deeper. Let's not settle as to this impulse that is leading me to feel anxious or leading me to
Right.
feel depressed. Where does that go? And as I started deconstructing, as I continue to do that and continue to try to live in the present,
Mm.
which is
Yeah.
so hard. It's so hard. I try to do, and I've shared this with friends when I have my moments of yoga, and I say
Yeah.
I'm going to focus on my hand on the floor. I'm going to focus on this. Like 2 minutes and a half later, I'm thinking about the sandwich I'm going to eat half an hour from now. And I'm like, and then I'm like, okay, back to the present, and then it's like 270 thoughts again. I
Yeah.
have another thing. So living in the present, I thought it was such a trivial thing, but it is so important because it brings you to the here, and it brings you and it repels any illusion, right? Because I think the
Yeah.
future is an illusion. It gives us compensating illusionary
Yeah.
like it gives it the illusion that we are in control. and
Sure.
and
Absolutely.
and I think it is
Absolutely.
important to I think it's important to plan. We need to plan, of course, but
Hmm.
to also know that it's still something that is not tangible. It's still
Right.
something that is away, and it's only but illusion. So in that process of being intentional with that, I've also deconstructed many other things. I've also become aware of
Mm.
many other things. Being living in the U.S. again for a year, and I say again because I lived here when I was a kid, but most of my life has been in Puerto Rico. So as a Puerto Rican
Yeah.
living in the diaspora, of the country that colonized my country, that there's many
Mhm.
things that I have been aware of, kind of like be it like taking that little pill from the Matrix,
Right.
and I've tried to strike some sort of balance between being aware, the cynicism, the living in the present, the not being apathetic just because the current situation is too confronting. And I'll go back perfect circle to what you were saying before about the story of Ahmad Aubrey.
Right.
Um,
Mhm.
I think the story of Ahmad Aubrey is almost like a deja vu, and that's
Hmm.
where it gets really tragic.
Right.
And of course, there's a specific value of Ahmad's life. There's this specific
Hmm.
value of this person's life, and his family can attest to that. The specific
Right.
value of this person's life. This person is not a statistic, is alive.
Yeah. Yeah.
And living in this country has been hard for me, and I do not claim the corner of victimhood or the corner of like I don't have the level of suffering that many people have, like my
Right.
African American brothers, my Latino brothers, and my Latina sisters are going through, because I, as a Puerto Rican, I have a passport which comes with all its baggage and everything, but I don't have the hardships that they have, and I don't claim to claim a patent over suffering.
Right.
Nevertheless, it is a weird place as a Puerto Rican living in the
Yeah.
diaspora,
Yeah.
balancing it off. And I want to ask you, like, as a human, as a
Hmm.
black person, as an African American, living in these United States of America, how do you? And this is part of the Tertuliandos, like how our relationship with our homeland. As you see,
Mm.
my Puerto Rican flag is there to remind me of my homeland, and that this term of homeland can be completely demythified, but there's something of having a sense of groundedness somewhere, and realizing
Right.
where that is.
Mhm.
How do you define how do you define homeland for you, and also
Yeah.
in the midst of everything that is going on, the life and the sacred life of Ahmad and what that
Yeah.
represents. How, how do you make
Yeah.
this balancing act of This is your land. This
Yeah.
is where you're born. What is your
Hmm.
relationship to this land and its
Yeah.
legacy, both good and bad? And how do
Mhm.
you
Uh,
correlate with that?
yeah. Very good question. Thank you so very much. Again, that is the first time anyone's ever asked me that question. You're on a roll. You're on a good roll. So, I love these United States of America. Um, and note, I did not say I love the conditions of these United States of America. I love these United States simply because this is where I was born. And each and every day of my life, the soil beneath me, the bedrock, the limestone, provides me with an opportunity, you see. The land truly of opportunity. And it is not, firstly, the land of opportunity because of its great skyscrapers and institutions of learning, because of its stock market and things of that sort. It is not a great country because of that. It is a great country because it is still yet uncharted what this country can be if we ever include compassion and equality and true tacit experience with each other. What I mean by that is most of the hell that has been propagated on this land, this country, has largely come due to ignorance. Ignorance. People don't know that just waving a hand, stepping across a riverbed, or going next door, or even standing outside to breathe the fresh air will have some sort of impact on
Okay, I think we lost Bushi there for a second. Let's see if we can have him back. We're
of a kind
almost
of
there. You go.
possibilities because
There you go. We're back.
we can
We're
continue.
back. We're back.
We, all right. Yeah, we can continue to do all of these wonderful things, but we've still not learned of each other. We're still living in ignorance, and we are responding out of ignorance. There's no reason that a Marge should have been killed simply because someone was overzealous about a stand your ground law, or overzealous about seeing a black person or a person of color going into a domicile. There's no reason for this. There's no reason for us to be killing each other in the manner in which we're doing. If we would just take the time to sit down and listen to one another, hear each other, experience one another, and be willing to do that, then this would be the land of tremendous possibilities. But until we're willing to do that, we will never be great, you see. But my relationship with this land is I love it. And I love it so much so that I will continue to be a voice of consciousness in this land. You see, that is how much I love it. I do not love what we do, you see, but I love the possibility of what we can do so much that I continue to share love and kindness and compassion and teach these very difficult, wise things to people. You know, one of the things that people don't know, and they lay out a laundry list most of the time about what plagues them, is that all of us have the same problem, and it's not money. Money may be an issue for us, but all of us have the same problem, and that is life is not happening the way that we want it to.
Hmm.
What we do is we build up psychological borders, and we enforce those borders with other psychological realities and constructs, and then we play them out on other people as if they are going to easily comply, you see. And so we all have the same problem. You not know, if I were to give every human being what they wanted, if I were able to say, here, you can have whatever you want, there would still be a want.
Mm-hmm.
Even with people having everything that they want, there still is an existential reality of beauty and existence that they have not pondered yet. And this is where God is to be found. We've discovered God is not to be found in churches of opulence and mega buildings and all of these sorts of things. It's in the simple things. This is where God is. We've gotten too complicated. And so I would say to this country, slow down, take the time to get to know each other. For those that are on the front lines fighting against the injustices such as racism, keep on fighting, because this is the way in which you keep your foot on the neck of those that would do harm to you even more. And while you're putting your foot on their neck, what you do is you peacefully send in the voice of reason. You do certain things to demonstrate your humanity, you see. And so my relationship with the United States of America is that it gave me a place to call home, and it has given me great opportunity to become the man that I've become. Now I see it fit to speak to its conscience and to help revive this nation that is on somewhat of a deathbed, you see. And if we continue in this fashion in which we are, well, someone will have to pay the funeral cost. Many more lives will be lost. Disorganization will run over this land. Apathy would reign, you see. And so I love it so much that I will continue to pray for it and speak the very hard truths to it, you see. Um, yeah,
I ask this last question to many people that come here, and it's just to give them an opportunity to have the last word,
yeah,
and to comment on this project we call life.
yeah.
If you had the chance to have some sort of time capsule that you can insert, uh,
Oh,
you can insert in this time capsule your view of this project of life, and in this time capsule mind it will be found not necessarily by a future generation but by a future species, and this is your
ah,
attempt to communicate to them what you found to be valuable and quite handy, pragmatically, philosophically, of life venturing in this thing we call Earth. So this will be found many, 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 many years later by another species. What things would you put here? Maybe material things, thoughts in this capsule. Give me a second. Don't answer yet because I can't hear you. I want to hear this answer in complete form. So I can't hear you. Let's see if we can have you back so you can give us your last word.
can
Let's
you hear
see.
me?
Yes, there we go. So you have the last word,
All
Bushi.
right. So I would, if this were possible, I would say to those that would come along after Earth or after us, I would suggest that we were a fully capable people of demonstrating the greatest healing that the galaxy had ever known. From the soil of the earth to the atmosphere to its people, we were profound in our possibilities, yet we failed because we were reluctant to experience the garden of God's beauty, the garden of our existence as human beings on psychological, physical, as well as spiritual levels. We failed to experience
Okay, lost you there for a second. Hold your thought. Don't conclude your thought yet. There you go. So maybe rewind 20 seconds. It's still there you go. Let's see if unmute it. Let's see if you can give us those 20 seconds back.
All right. Can you hear me now? All right. Yeah, we theorized a lot, we hypothesized a lot, but we rarely touched one another in a very viable way. This is what I would say, because that is exactly what is going to happen should destruction befall us.
Hmm.
You see, someone else will come along and wonder what took place, and the truth will be not that we were great as a nation and other nations didn't want to comply with democracy. That's not going to be the
Okay, lost you there again. Let's see. Lost you there one last time. I don't want to lose anything. There we go. Let's try again. Yeah.
that we never fully understood our place in the universe and our possibility to make this planet and all other um, neighbors in the galaxy a wonderful place to call home. This is what I would say. But before we get to that, I would hope that we do get it together. We do express our greatest humanity, our greatest compassion, our greatest love, and let that flourish throughout the land. Angel, my team now is working on something. It's somewhat of a project that they're encouraging me to do. I'm looking on doing, and it's been done before, a walk, a peace walk. Well, I will travel from one destination to the other on foot, basically teaching what compassion looks like and teaching others to go out and be compassionate in their cities and shock the devil out of people. People are full of hate and fury and they're full of sadness and misery. Love them and be courageous in loving them, you see. This is how we correct the world. This is how we add more productive minds and useful minds to the conversation of our presence here on the earth, you see. So we have to love people. This is what Jesus did. This is what the Buddha encouraged. This is what all of our scriptures are in indicating to us, that the greatest of all of the aspects of the tenets is love. Perfect love casts out fear. The two greatest commandments that Jesus gave, love God and love your neighbor. That's it. There's not too much more theological immersion that you need with those two. You see. So
Man, I really value this. This
I can hardly hear you. I don't know what happened.
I can really value this. Can you hear me? Let's see. Hello, can you hear me?
All right, go right ahead.
You can hear me?
All right.
You can
Okay.
thumbs up. You can hear me?
Good to go.
Okay, okay. So thanks so much, man. Thanks for allowing us
Oh, there we go
to
again.
allow. Can you hear me anymore? I think we're having. I think you're having the cup of tea I was having a while
I
ago.
don't know what happened. It did something. I think the audio
Can you hear me? I'll take you.
did something here.
I'll take you out and then come
All
back
right.
in. Okay.
Back, okay.
Okay.
All right. Let
And
me
then
try that.
we'll do a closing before. All right. So we just want to do. Yeah, my voice is a little bit low. I don't know why. Let me see. Let me do a little sound check. Yeah. Let me see. Can you guys hear me fine? How do you guys hear me? Is it good? Better? Too low? Hello? Check, check. 1, 2. Should be going in now. But if you can hear me and it's fine, I just increased the volume a little bit. So, yep, all good? Okay. Gracias, Ana. Thank you, Ana. Let's see if we can have Bushi come back in and then we'll just give this a wrap. All right. Okay. Hear me good, Bushi?
Yes, there I am. All
Okay.
right. I
All
can
right.
hear you.
So So basically, let's see. Okay. So thank you so much for taking out this space.
Oh,
And not only this space that we have this very direct conversation, but just opening your heart
yeah,
and your
thank
brain
you.
and sharing with us.
It is truly an honor. I do thank you. This has been absolutely wonderful. I do hope that your listeners will benefit from this in some way. I certainly have, just by being in your presence. I wish you the absolute best. I love you, little brother, and I am always here for you.
Gracias, hermano. I value that with immense appreciation, and right back at you. I believe that um, opening these spaces and the intentionality in which you live your life is not in vain. And at least on a personal note, the fact that we're still in touch, I don't think is accidental.
Right.
And I learn and I unlearn plenty from your praxis in life. And thank you so much. I thank all the people that were here for a little bit, for a longer bit.
Yeah.
There's some people that wrote. I think Ana Rodriguez sends you some shout outs.
Anna.
Bushi.
Uh, I love Anna. Anna's a wonderful person. I love her really.
And everyone else that was in tune. Muchas gracias. Thank you so much. And un gran namaste for all you guys, and for you, Bushi, and your family. Hope you guys are safe and learning and unlearning every day. Gente, nos vemos. Adios. Buenas noches. Guten Abend. Good evening. And I'll see you guys tomorrow in the next Tertuliando.